Right, hopefully this is working. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you can. I appreciate it. Thanks. I actually thought of a new topic today, right? Weird, a new topic. And that is, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so I was thinking, what is actually different about the fighting game community nowadays compared to the Street Fighter days, right? Street Fighter 2 days, so to speak, right? And what has stayed the same? And I was thinking, and I hadn't thought of this comparison before. Back in the day, there used to be this idea that it was always West Coast or East Coast was the best because, each area had some stronger players that were more known, right? And isn't that kind of what the LGBTQ is now? A lot of people back in the day, they used to automatically try to get clout or something like, oh, hey, I'm West Coast, so I must be better than you because we have some good players here. And I've realized that the LGBTQ have kind of, is it Sonic Fox's fault? Sonic Fox's fault, quotation marks. Is it almost Sonic Fox's fault for, talking about how fucking gay he is all the time? And, obviously Sonic Fox has been an accomplished, fighting game player in some different games. And a lot of people almost kind of live off his coattails, so to speak. Like, oh, I'm LGBTQ, so I must automatically be good because Sonic Fox was good in something, right? And I hadn't thought of that comparison before, so I want to talk a little bit more deep about that, how things, change, but they stay the same, and certain things that are definitely different. But the clique aspect is definitely the same. I hadn't thought about that comparison before. You can definitely see back in the day, let's talk about this a little bit if you're old enough to remember. There used to be this, unless you were East Coast or West Coast, you almost got no respect whatsoever. Even a lot of people forget that, back in the day, I was technically from the Midwest, right? And so that's why, I've seen people, oh, I think Clayton lives in this area. I think Clayton lives in this. Even when I was in California, they used to call me like Surfer Boy Ryu. You know what I mean? Because it was almost like sacrilegious or something to admit that anybody that was not West Coast or East Coast could ever do something in tournaments, could ever beat anybody good, right? I've even talked about back in the day, during those Street Fighter days, you know what I mean? JFL had beaten Arturo. Arturo Sabin is an accomplished, player from the East Coast. And, a lot of people only got credit unless they were East Coast or West Coast. And so when JFL was in Canada and he was winning a lot of Canadian tournaments because he beat, Arturo, he automatically got respect. And so I was one of the few Midwest players who was actually traveling around to different tournaments in different parts of the country and actually doing well consistently, right? Like, because let's remember, a lot of people, maybe once in their life, they've done good in a tournament here or there, but to consistently do well, not many people have done that. And I've even told that story back in like the CVS days. Flo is an example of a guy, although Flo was a Midwest guy, Flo was one of those rare people that was actually accepted as a good video game player, so to speak, right? A lot of Midwest players, especially if you go back even farther during Street Fighter days, real like old school Street Fighter 2 days, maybe like, Jesse and Wes or something, you know what I mean, might have gotten some respect in Street Fighter. But generally speaking, you know what I mean, almost no one had any respect whatsoever unless you were East Coast or West Coast. It didn't fucking exist, right? And so Flo was one of the few people that had a little bit of respect, in the fighting game community. And when I beat him, people were like, whoa, someone actually else was able to beat Flo. And like, wait, he was from Midwest? That's kind of weird, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then I was traveling to all these different things, and I was still consistently doing well. And it wasn't until then I actually finally beat JFL. And, the whole point of that story is that, it was very hard to get any kind of respect unless you were East Coast or West Coast. And even after that, a lot of people still, I was called Surfer Boy Ryu in California for some reason. They didn't want to say I was Midwest or I was from this area, blah, 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 right? And this kind of ideology of East Coast versus West Coast were the only people that mattered. If you are old enough to remember, at one point, when we were getting into that transitional, pun not intended, phase of moving from arcades to console and everything like that, trying to make Street Fighter more real with different kind of evos and everything like that. SRK had this system It was called, I think they called it Apex at first. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was called Apex, right? And Apex was this system that they were trying to bring together the Street Fighter community. They were trying to make sure that every tournament counted to see who was going to be seeded for tournaments like EVO and everything like that, to see who really was the best in the world. That it wasn't going to only be just East Coast and West Coast, that we were going to recognize that other people from different parts of the country were playing. And so what happened, though, is for Apex and everything like that, they legitimately started not counting a lot of Midwest tournaments. They were afraid that, oh, maybe these Midwest people, they're just saying that they're winning tournaments or something like that. So these tournament results are fake or something like that. Because I even remember Apex, I was not even seated correctly. Like, they didn't want to count some of the tournaments that I won. Like, this is, we don't trust this tournament. And supposedly the way that they were making this, like, real is like, oh, well, we got to call the number of the arcade, and it's not our fault if the arcade operator doesn't pick up. You know what I mean? We tried to call, but maybe, you didn't answer. So it was like they did some like shady shit like that. They're like, oh, well, we tried to call this arcade to see that it was real, but you didn't pick up or whatever it was. So that's why we didn't count that tournament or some shit like that. And of course, basically, it happened that just, mostly just East Coast and West Coast shit fucking counted, right? You know what I mean? For those things back in the day. Maybe cool idea, but it was like, not implemented very well, or there was not a lot of trust factor given. And for sure, you know what I mean? I'm sure a lot of people probably did do some bullshit, console tournaments, whatever, that were probably a little bit shady, but, inevitably a lot of Midwest people just got fucked because of it. But again, it was that priority to the, East Coast and West Coast. And even when we think about cliques as well in video games, different, just even local cliques, let's say, whatever it might be, it could be a local clique or whatever it might be. If you went to a tournament, they used to give like priority to this clique, right? Now, this might not have happened to this, what I'm going to talk about here. The way that tournaments would be delayed for people, be like, oh, this guy's too important. If he's not here, we can't go on, or we got to give special treatment to players. You know what I mean? Like, maybe to that extent, that wouldn't happen now, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think, especially with the way things are streamed now, I don't think you'd be, I told that story of fucking, what's his fucking name? Ryan Hart, whatever that story was, right? Ryan Hart, they like literally let him replay his matches because he was sick and he was famous or whatever the fuck it was. You can be sure, me on disability, in and out of hospital, doctors tell me how long I'm going to be alive. They never let me fucking replay any real matches or redo shit, whatever the fuck those stories were. You know what I mean? And I've told so many crazy stories like that fucking Flash Metroid story, dude. He made me beat him 3 times in a row before he agreed that, he finally lost, which even then he still complained. But, certain things like that I don't think would happen anymore. But certainly there was, priority was given to people that the tournament organizers liked. And there used to be things like, even say a local example, say a big area in Michigan might have been something like Detroit has a lot of players, Ann Arbor has a lot of players. So Detroit might try to run a monopoly. Oh, they don't want to go to Ann Arbor tournaments, blah, blah, blah. Or if we go to Ann Arbor tournament, you need to run this tournament when we want to be there. If we're going to be 2 hours late, who cares? Whatever the fuck it is. I've told that story. I was in Chicago. Fucking people used to hold up the tournament for hours. All this kind of shit. And they purposely would even do, like I told that one Guilty Gear the tournament I collapsed at, if people remember. I was very sick that tournament. And it's kind of boring to tell the story, but I guess if people don't remember that story, I'm winning all these tournaments, and they knew I was really fucking sick that tournament. And so they purposely delayed the tournament. Like, they saw me taking all this medicine. And it's so crazy to even think, because that would never fucking happen now, right? But, Chicago's too important. You know what I mean? Well, even though we live in Chicago, we're just going to delay the tournament for like 2-3 hours because we see Clayton is sick. oh, Clayton's all fucked up in the corner. Oh yeah, we're ready to play the tournament now. And then they, finally fucking beat me. And it was like, dude, come on, bro. People they don't like to talk about that shit, but the point is, though, that there have definitely always been cliques in the fighting game community. People always trying to prioritize different cliques. They're like, oh, this clique is more important. We don't like this player. We don't like this player, but we like this player, so we're going to give them more priority, right? That has always, I guess, stayed the same, right? But now the LGBTQ is the clique, right? And the LGBTQ, just because, oh, we have Sonic Fox who's good, now we're automatically going to say that all our players are fucking special, even though they've done fucking jack shit, right? So I was thinking about that comparison, and that comparison actually is pretty good, actually. I hadn't thought about that. Again, to the extent that it goes, maybe not, because things are definitely more streamlined. I can't imagine, actually a tournament being streamed and me beating these guys 3 times in a row, and they're like, oh, that doesn't count. Beat him another 2 times, beat him another 2 times, beat him another 2 times. Okay, we'll admit you finally beat him, right? Or, oh, like, we're going to delay the tournament. Let's delay the tournament 3 hours while Clayton is just there, like, standing at the machine waiting because, we see he's sick. Let's wait till he's, like, hunched over in the corner and we can tell he's fucked up. Okay, let's play the match now. That shit obviously wouldn't happen now. Or who knows, right? But the idea, the basis that there is a clique, I don't think that's a hot take. And of course, that's fucking true. There's definitely priorities given to different players. But one thing, something that definitely has changed, and I was thinking about, is the idea of execution and like physical dexterity and skill being an actual skill has definitely changed. You definitely see, especially because you think about, excuse me, sorry man, I've been pretty fucking sick myself lately. Trying to keep myself from throwing up, honestly. I'm just completely out of it lately. The idea of execution definitely has changed, right? The idea that people don't, like execution now, which almost seems to be like an accepted kind of thing, trying to take it out of games. That definitely is something that changed, because even back when I was playing, and you think that consoles were becoming more of a thing, and there were like a lot of kind of like safety measures trying to be put into place to actually allow people to not cheat, trying to make sure that people don't macro. I remember back in the Marvel days, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 era. Actually, I feel like the 2 biggest things talked about when the transition to, console tournaments being a thing, where they're like, make sure that people do not macro, and what are we going to do about Moss sticks? Because Moss sticks used to have this thing that I think Moss sticks were kind of made by, I don't know if they were made exactly by a company, but they were definitely a popular arcade stick in the community. And the problem with like those arcade sticks is a lot of times people would get those arcade sticks and they would randomly press the start button. Not often, but it was often enough that it was becoming a discussion in the community to do, what about like Moss arcade sticks? Because they might randomly pause, and what do we do about this? Those were the 2 biggest discussion. It's like, how do we make sure that nobody macros, nobody button binds, and what do we do about Moss sticks? You know what I mean? We got to get this company, whatever it was, to make the arcade sticks a little bit better, or we got to just say you can't use them or something like that. Those were the actually biggest discussions that I remember when you think about execution. And I remember the button binding thing was definitely a hot topic because of, and the thing is, it wasn't even a thing like Guilty Gear. It was more of a thing like Marvel to keep people from wave dashing faster than you can normally do, to make sure that wave dashing was, still a skill. And you thought about things like, roll canceling and all this kind of shit. It wasn't even in the league of something like Guilty Gear, It was just accepted that Guilty Gear, like, of course you're not going to macro. It was really a Street Fighter Marvel thing, right? To make sure that you're not holding down 3 punches with Balrog, all that kind of stuff, to make sure you're not wave dashing too fast in Marvel. Those were the biggest things. It wasn't even a thing like fucking Guilty Gear. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember. It wasn't even until, Guilty Gear maybe Reload that, people really, I remember seeing people start complaining about, oh, I think we should let, people be able to macro and button bind in Guilty Gear. And like, what do you mean? And of course, it was always the anime guy. You know what I mean? It wasn't the actual Street Fighter person, Marvel guy, so to speak. It was always the anime nerd that all these years had been hyping up Guilty Gear was so much better than Street Fighter. Guilty Gear is the best fighting game ever. You know what I mean? It was always that player that then once Street Fighter guys started playing Guilty Gear and they realized, oh fuck, we're not actually good at this game now that actual people who have played fighting games before are playing. They're like, oh fuck, can we like add macros now? Can we add button binding? You know what I mean? It was honestly, it was never even a discussion until Guilty Gear started becoming more popular, right? And it was the anime nerd. The anime nerd that for so many years had talked about how they were better than everybody, that Street Fighter wasn't skillful, that they were the real player, that Guilty Gear was a real game, that once people started playing it, that we're actually good at fighting games, then people are like, oh, I think we should have this, we should have this, blah, blah, blah. And, macros were not even, by the time I quit entering tournaments in 2008, it was still not a common thing. It was still accepted that it was cheating. Like, we don't use this. This isn't in the real game. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know. When did they finally... I'm not even sure. Obviously, it must have been way after I've entered tournaments, right? That it finally started. People are like, yeah, I think we should allow it. But, hitbox and everything like that wasn't a thing when I was playing. Nothing like that. So, excuse me. Yeah, so I was thinking things that have changed, things that, haven't changed, the clique aspect, whatever. Like, oh, I'm from California, I must be good. Well, nah. There's some good people from California, but just from your California doesn't mean you're good. Oh, East Coast, I must be good. Nah. And of course there's probably this idea that maybe there's like a hot pot of competition, you know what I mean? But that doesn't necessarily mean that, it's not a fucking guarantee, dude, Yeah. Oh, and of course, I forgot that story, thinking about stuff that would never happen nowadays. I told that story, man, back when I was, that first year of disability, man, I fucking won every tournament I went to, and besides Evo. And, man, I went to that one Pittsburgh tournament, if you guys remember that, and they canceled the entire tournament when I showed up. Like, that's like the different level I was at in Guilty Gear back then, dude. Like, they just canceled the entire tournament. Like, they're like, oh yeah, oh fuck, you came? Like, well, we're just gonna cancel because we know you win, and then like Kenji's here, so Kenji will probably get second. So yeah, no one wants to enter now. It's like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, of course, I don't think they would ever fucking cancel an entire fucking tournament, But the dark ages of video games. But even if it was the dark ages, some things are the same. The click aspect of video games is the same, right? And I was thinking, is the only thing different execution? I'd have to think about it. Is the only actual real kind of different mindset maybe the execution aspect of video games that, the community is doing its damnedest to get away with or take away, but oh boy. Anyway, yeah, fuck me, dude. Oh man, dude. Oh, if you guys like subs, like, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.